I think the teenagers will like it if we have the oopsie photo.
Yeah.
All right, we're live. Hi, I'm Patti Napolitano with Wellness Cleveland, and I'm probably the professor of your Advanced Generalist Social Work course with communities, but maybe you are following the podcast, Planting Trees for Future Shade, where we talk with people about some of the ways that their career has been shaped and the many fascinating behind-the-scenes social support careers that are out there in the state of Ohio and also Ohio County and surrounding counties in West Virginia. Ohio shares a border with many states along the Ohio River, and we're often in really great collaborative partnerships. But today we're highlighting our friend and neighbor, West Virginia, the only state in the United States that all of the counties are Appalachian counties. So we do love it. So this is Jeremy, and we're at the Grave Creek Mound Archaeological Complex.
Yes.
I got all the words in the right order on the right first try.
Exactly.
Can you tell us a little bit about where we're at?
Okay. We are in Marshall County, West Virginia. We are on the border with the Ohio River, and we are one of the largest Adena burial mounds in the world. I believe we are the second largest mound in the country. What I like to tell people is we have three things going on here. We are a National Historic Landmark for the Grave Creek Mound. We are a research center. We hold over 1 million artifacts found in this state, and we are a museum. So we have a trifecta of things going on here. So we have to balance all of those things under
and
one
there's
umbrella.
A balance coming in. I came in earlier, and it's a wonderful, it's a shared space in the museum portion of it.
Correct.
But there's a definite division to the themes of it. And it's some pretty diverse stuff we've got here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big wheels, artifacts, a dugout canoe.
Yeah, so we basically have three levels here in the museum. We have a local level on the first floor, then we go up to state, and then on the third floor we have the Adena specific exhibits. So we try to keep everything separated but the same at the same time.
Yeah. And I was a kid who grew up in Ohio. In 7th grade we have to take Ohio history, and this is the region. Ohio is a made-up place. We're in the region, and we have a lot of the long-term archaeological facts together, but we have serpent mounds in Ohio that a lot of Ohio kids know, but this is different than that. The Grave Creek Mound is...
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up, because since we're getting started, I like to make very, very clear who we're talking about here with this site. This is pre-colonialization Native America. This, if you think of what you have been used to seeing as Native Americans' portrayal, this is their ancestors. We're going 2,000 years back from the colonialization period. So we are a Native American museum in the very earliest sense of the word. And I like to emphasize that, because we use the word Adena here. That's not what they call themselves. That's what that's what archaeologists calls this group of people, specifically from where they were discovered. So we have to be very careful when we give names and labels to groups of people that we know nothing about. So we try to be very, very cognizant of that. We make it very clear that Adena is a given name by other people. We do not know what they called themselves. All we can do is gauge by the artifacts that we find here.
So it's a puzzle.
It certainly is.
It's a mystery.
Yes, and I urge people to not jump to conclusions and hold their assumptions lightly, because we're always learning new things. I think that you put yourself in a very dangerous position when you believe something wholeheartedly and refuse to see alternative viewpoints. So
that's the scientific method, is to always be looking for retests that don't fit in with your theory and then proposing a new theory that allows for the new things you're learning.
Right. Avoid rigidness at all costs. So that's what I like to point out here, is that we really do not know. And that's despite people's need to know this A equals B equals C, we really can't have that knowledge because we are going 2,000 years back in history. None of us were there, so all we can do is guess.
So what have we been able to ascertain about the burial mound?
We know from GPR, which is ground penetrating radar, because we will not put a shovel into that mound. It is a sacred site. Again, we have to remember that this is a burial site. So we use very non-intrusive methods to gauge what happened here. At one point, through surveys, we have found out from the strata of the ground that there was a drainage ditch around the mound, emphasizing that that would keep it from settling, because if it just rained on it, it would just go down flat and it would just erode away. That's why it's as big as it is today. So the drainage ditch, and then around the outside of that, we have found the remnants of old posts in the ground, which this tale tells us there were most likely is the key word with a lot of these things I'm telling you, that there were most likely buildings, huts, whatever you want to call them. We don't know what they were. So this was, in fact, a ceremonial site. So that is the main theory today. That is what we're going with today.
Because it does not have archaeological clues to indicate that it was a place where people lived.
That is correct. There's no, you would typically find like gardens or something like that around, somewhere where somebody stayed for a long period of time. So there have been no remnants of that.
Right.
So there were, at one time, many, many mounds in Moundsville around this area. This mound is believed to be part of a complex of a lot of different mounds. This was the largest one. It's the only one that remains. Its history has been threatened over and over again since its discovery in the 1700s. And I know that's a strange thing to say. How can you discover something that's 60 feet high? Well, the fact is it was covered in trees. And so in the middle of a forest, it would just look like a hill until you walked around the outside of it and you were like, wait a second, it's a little too perfect. No hill has perfect edges around the bottom of it. So once it was discovered, it had a lot of it sits right in the middle of town, and it's still here. Houses were built around it. That was right up through the 1950s. It was in the middle of a neighborhood. It had a horse track around it. It had cornfields around it, and nobody ever destroyed it. So that's very significant to me, that people had enough foresight over the last 300-400 years to keep it intact. So there's something to say for that.
Yeah. And the other mounds, do we know what happened to them?
Yes, unfortunately, as with the times, they were plowed over for farming. Because before we judge people's actions in the past, we have to put ourselves in their position. These people that's their survival. So, and there wasn't enough cognizant thought of what could this be, what they look like were obstacles. So they were unfortunately all plowed under.
So it was not known that they were burial mounds.
That is correct.
And probably whatever remains were in there were not recognized as such when they were plowed.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So, not all of us can be as cognizant of that sort of thing. So, but that's just the way it goes, unfortunately.
Yeah. I read so much historical fiction, and I'm trying to think how characters would respond. It seems difficult for me to believe that people who lived off the land wouldn't recognize how
Yeah,
unusual
I
it
know,
was to
that's
have all
right.
of those
And I
mounds
don't,
of dirt there.
yeah, I don't like to jump to conclusions because we don't know, but
Yeah.
I agree with you. Like,
My
you know,
husband just went on vacation last summer with his father. His father had served in Vietnam and wanted to always go back. And so he brought his two sons. So they went to Cambodia and Vietnam and Laos and Thailand. And they were going to these beautiful ceremonial caves in Laos. And the tour guide said, take a good look. They're all gone. We're already moving all of the statues out because foreign investors have come in and they're putting in a golf course and they're
Yeah,
going to raise
that's-
it. So sometimes,
yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily the times, it's also something people are doing now. And
Yeah.
some of the people who I'm working with are really working to preserve things like this.
Yes, absolutely.
So how did this place become an official preserve spot?
That is a good question. So this site's history, I'm giving rough estimates on dates.
Sure.
1800s.
We'll fact check later.
Yeah.
We'll fact check for the textbook.
In the 1800s, it was excavated by the family that owned the property. They were not trained archaeologists. They dug a tunnel straight down and straight across. There was no method. There was no calculation. It was just straight down and straight across.
Was this before there was mining in the area?
That is 1800s. I'd say it's about the same time.
Yeah. So they would have used maybe whatever techniques.
Whatever they had. So straight down, straight across. They found a burial chamber from about 20 feet down, and then another one towards the bottom, in a straight line, two bodies in one, and then one body in the chamber. But they were log tombs. They had shells, beads. They were obviously burial sites, these people. We're assuming, it's the key word for our discussion today, assuming that these people were very high up in their society to warrant this kind of burial. Now, the mound was built in phases over 150 years. So the theory is one level, two were buried. They covered that, buried the next, and then covered that, resulting in what we have outside today. So once that happened, the site owners decided that they would turn this into a museum. The mound itself would become a museum. They tunneled out the bottom, they opened a chamber inside and put the remains on display. So this being the 1800s, it wasn't particularly a tourist economy.
Right.
If you did go somewhere, it would take you weeks to get there. So it failed as a museum. Now we get into some murky water because after it failed, it is said that everything vanished and it was collapsed. The tunnels were collapsed that led inside.
Too early in American history for an insurance settlement on that, huh?
Correct. That's all very murky. That's what we deal with a lot here. So to come to the short answer, we have nothing that was found in this mound on site. We have rumors, we have speculation about where all these things went, but nothing remains on site. So over the next 100 years, this site went back and forth between property owners. Its existence threatened many times to be plowed over for neighborhood development or that sort of thing, but it still remained. In the early 1900s, the state of West Virginia bought it because it was sold by the property owner. So now the state was in control, specifically by the warden of the penitentiary, which is right across the street from us. I don't know if many people know that we're right across the street from a former penitentiary. So the warden was in charge of the property for decades and decades. And then it was submitted as a National Historic Landmark. It was accepted, and now it is under the state's protection and has been ever since. And that's where we are today, nearly 100 years later.
Yeah.
So it's fenced, it's cared for, and it's its own site now. So we're very fortunate.
Can you talk about the steps and the thing put on top that the warden had done?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, there are steps leading up to the mound. They were put there by the warden at the penitentiary at that time, along with the obelisk at the top. We get a lot of questions about that. So that was in the 1940s, I believe.
And is that the same stone that the penitentiary
Yes,
is made of?
yes,
Where
thank
is
you.
that from?
I really couldn't answer that. I'm assuming it's local, considering the amount of stone. But yeah, so it's sandstone. Yeah.
I was walking down the steps and I thought, oh, those poor guys probably had to mill all this stone too. I was just commiserating with these prisoners.
There's no machines back then.
No.
Yeah, that was handwork.
Oh,
So yeah, so the people that built the Grave Creek Mound had carried the dirt up in baskets. It took over 150 years. So theoretically, you could have spent your entire life building and not seen its completion.
oh yeah.
So it's a lot of hand labor. Regard 2,000 years later, it still is. So
that is a centralizing purpose for a community.
yes, certainly.
That's what that is.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I would like to talk about the archaeological complex, and then we have some questions
Yeah,
I'd like
sure.
to ask you about your career development, but I'd love for you to talk about the relationships that you've built with the Native American Council of Central Ohio, which I'm not sure if I said all those words in the right order.
Okay. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Trying.
We have made, I started here in 2014, and I would say about 5 to 6 years ago, we made a concerted effort to reach out to Native Americans to work with them instead of closing ourselves off and saying, this is our site. There needs to be collaboration. Nobody's an island. I know people say that a lot. It's become a cliche, but it is for a reason.
Because it's hard, and you need to keep reminding yourself. And you're like, this is so difficult to balance, but it is worth it.
Right. So.
And it is important to collaborate, and it's a value that we have.
Yeah, and one of the most important things that we've done here since I've been here is repatriation, which is where we return remains to the tribes that say these are our people. Has been one of the most important things we've done here. The challenge is finding and getting your message out to as many people as possible. For the tribes to come back to us and say, these are our people, we will go from here. It's been very important. It's very challenging because it takes constant communication, and for both sides, that can be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
But the important thing is to not get complacent.
And there's many steps to coming to a shared understanding.
That is correct. That's a mutual conversation, and it requires people to work together. And I know I'm speaking in vague terms, but it's a very delicate balance. It's a very delicate thing to do, to know when to speak and when not to speak, and what you know and what you don't know. It's a very difficult thing to do.
And you got some beautiful outcomes here on display. There's a canoe, there's a structure inside that have been the result of that collaboration. Can you talk about those two pieces?
I would be glad to. We have in our museum a dugout canoe. It's hand carved, but with collaboration with the Seneca Nation of Indians out of New York. That was years and years in the making. They were kind enough to do that for us, and it is still on display to this day. That is built by hand. It is a great learning opportunity. It is, I believe, 13 feet long and weighs 650 pounds. And we learned a lot through this. I did not know, for example, that during winter, that canoes such as that were sunk below the river to let them freeze over. And then when it thawed, they would come back up, because if you left it outside, it would crack and deteriorate in the winter weather. Which I found fascinating. I didn't know that.
Treat it like wood.
It makes sense when you think about it. But That's fascinating stuff. And also, we also collaborate with them over 4 to 5 years of, of, of plans and models and archaeological research. Those buildings I told you about in the beginning, that's what we're trying to recreate. And we did with their help. And that we hand built that just as Natives Americans would have done by hand. There's no machinery used, there's no bolts, it's all straps. Leather straps, branches bent. The branches were soaked in water to make them bendable.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was fascinating. And another collaboration example, we want to put signs outside, simple things like that about the site, like this is a burial site. Please respect that you are on a burial site. We wanted to put these signs up. We wanted to put signs about the site itself up. We all just didn't come in here in a group and say, well, what do we want to put out there? We said, maybe we should reach out to other people and they can tell us what they think should be out here, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. These are their ancestors. Let them speak. Let them have a voice. So we did so. Now, like I said, this is ongoing. It takes time. You can't get in a rush. You get in a rush, you get sloppy, you get careless, and then you pay the price later. So this is ongoing. It takes years and years and years, and you have to be willing to do that.
Because you have to be willing to think of the generations and how this decision will impact them.
Yeah, that's correct. It's not all about you at this very moment or looking down the road here.
That is not in line with strategic planning.
The older you get, the more you realize you have to adjust with things and not.
Well, being a government employee, which I've been a county level employee on a federal grant, so many masters, there's definitely numbers, right? So
for sure.
How do you navigate between the slow, steady work that the outcome is the patients, the outcome is the continued relationship? How do you measure that for state reporting?
Anytime that you make progress beyond where you were before, it's still a result.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If I had never talked to someone before and I said, well, I've opened the line of communications with this person now, that's still progress.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a physical thing. Progress is progress, whether you can see a physical object or not. And you have to be okay with that.
Well, and you have to be able to quantify that. So I worked on my federal grant, and I put in there the number of contacts I made a month. The number of new other courts or other helping professionals I collaborated with to talk about the programs we're running. So we're able to count contacts and relationships.
It's still something. Yeah. Temper your expectations.
Mm.
You know what I mean? We get too fired up and we get in a hurry and we get in a rush and we need to see things. And you put yourself at a disadvantage when you get in a hurry.
Yeah.
So
in Cleveland, we have, we started the EPA. The 6th time that we were aware the Cuyahoga River caught fire from train tracks dripping down on top of it. And so the EPA was founded, and there's a plaque at 0.0 of this canal that they started measuring. They would cut off and do a point in time count of the number of fish in the loch, and there were 0 the first year.
Sure.
And there were like less than a dozen for the first 5 years, and now it's in the thousands.
Yeah, right.
That the kind of progress takes decades.
Yeah, it's not overnight.
It doesn't mean that you don't chart when you have 3 fish or you just give up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's the same idea here. So you have to be comfortable with slow progress.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
All right. You've got some notes. What are we missing?
Oh, this was just for our second section.
Okay, second section. You feel like we're ready to move on?
Yeah, I think so.
I can always come back. I'm in Barnesville quite a bit now. All right. So thinking about your career, is this exactly what you wanted to do growing up?
No.
What did you think you were going to be when you were young? What are some of the career aspirations you had?
I don't know how I'm going to look at here, but I really had none. I've always been, I don't want to say aimless, but I just, whatever appears before me.
That was my youngest. She
Yeah.
would always say, Mom, I want to be 8.
Yeah.
I'm busy. I don't want to think about that. And
Yeah.
that's not to say that she's purposeless in her life, but her dreams do not involve a vocational career.
I think people need to be very clear about that. There are some of us who even as children are pointed at one vocation.
Mhm.
I've met them. You've met them. I'm sure
Mhm.
we've all met them.
I know Air Force pilots when they're 8.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
know
that's
they're
what I'm
going to
saying.
be an Air Force
But-
pilot.
And if you see enough of these people, you'll start to think that something's wrong with you because you're not like that. Don't let that happen to you.
Yeah.
Don't let that happen to you. Be happy for them because they got a direct path. They know exactly what they're doing. Your path may be more difficult, but hey, that's the way it goes. So you
Yeah.
have to experiment. That's what I did. So I've had a lot of different careers. I did not start college until I was 22 because I graduated high school, and that was aimless right there. 18 to 22, I worked as a welder for 4 years in a factory, and I was like, well, I'll go to college. What major do you pick? Well, I don't know either. English lit was good enough.
Mhm.
I was like that even when I was younger, so I graduated with an English degree, and that led me to work at a newspaper for 10 years. And then I shifted over to internet content, and that led me here because I was hired here to specifically promote. See, a lot of people, they look at my background and they say, how did you end up working in a museum? Because this is one of those careers that people say, I want to do that. And they're right on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of ended up in it. So that's the way life works for people like me. You just kind of end up. There's not anything particularly bad about that.
No.
So I ended up here doing, promotional work. I need to get people like we're doing right here. This is what I was hired for. Now, over the course of, how long have I been here? 10 years here, I have morphed into pure administration, which is essentially
that's the curse in government work, right?
Yeah,
the curse for competency. Once they realize you're good at something, they say, "Oh,
Yeah.
you'll be great at reports. Why don't you manage this project for us?"
And wouldn't you know it, I seem to have a knack for this sort of thing because I'm very good at coordination.
Mhm.
Because that's what I am. I'm the midpoint. I'm on site here, but I'm also answering to officials above me.
Mhm.
I'm the middle. I'm a catalyst. I make people hear. I get people hear what they need, and I tell people there what I need, and I work like that. That's what I do.
Communicate.
Yeah, exactly.
Collaborate.
See, full circle.
Translate.
Yep, exactly. That's what I do. So everything you do will pay off.
Absolutely.
In one way or another.
And those are skills we can't teach. And when I'm teaching my graduate students, I'll tell them, like, I can't give you the gift of gab. I can't make you an extrovert or an introvert.
Yeah, right.
I can't make you curious about the way that other people see the world. You walked in the door with that, and that's going to be your superpower.
Yeah, exactly.
And you got a skill set that you've learned how to leverage.
Yeah, you don't just start off like with.
You have to know who you are.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point.
All right. What's the best piece of career advice that you have for young adults?
There is one person in this world that you will answer to, and that's yourself. So I would urge people to practice discernment, specifically know your own voice from the voice of programming. Even ever since we were kids, we get programmed. It's not intentional. It's not an act of evil. It's the way society works. Now, for example, the word should trigger a thought in your head. If somebody, when you are younger, tells you you should do this, you're good at this, you should do this, that word should trigger something in your head that makes you stop and say, who am I doing this for?
Mm.
That's not to say everybody that tells you these things should be ignored or anything to that point. But like, let's say you're interested in something. Are you interested in it? Or did people tell you should be interested in it?
A lot of kids who want to be lawyers. Why? I just think I'd be good at it. I bet people have told you you'll be a great lawyer.
I saw a video last week on YouTube, and it was a young woman who had just graduated with an accounting degree, and she had lost her job, and she said she didn't care because she hated accounting. And I thought, then why did you pick it? You have a responsibility to yourself to carve your own path, and not just, you put yourself in a dangerous position when you, let's say, you say, I want to do this because it pays a lot. Well, there's a high price to pay for that. Big jobs and big salaries come with big hours and big stress.
I have worked with indigent individuals. I've worked with the ALICE, which is like, you're living on the fringes and you're also employed. I've worked with some of the wealthiest families, and I will tell you, everyone talks about their mother-in-law. Everyone is worried about their budget. And I've worked with people who have had lots and lots of money and said, my budget every month is more than I made as I could have dreamed of making every year as a child, and I'm still having the same problems.
It won't solve anything.
It solves a lot of problems, but not all of them.
Not all of them. We're still people. Also, I would suggest balancing passion with practicality. I hate the word passion because passion is fleeting. I would use the phrase intense interest. If you're very interested in something, know what you're getting into, what the likely end game is for you. Know what you're willing to suffer for. Because a lot of jobs are very difficult. A job that you love to do can be low paying. It can be stressful, and that will affect you as well. So you need to be able to look down the road and say, how am I going to end likely? You don't know, but you have to look and you have to say, what is the likely end game of this scenario, of this path that I take? You have to balance practicality with passion. And also, finally, along with that advice, your early years, your teens, your 20s, that is your time for experimentation. As you get older, and your options will narrow, whether you like it or not. You have obligations, you have finances, and then your path gets narrower and narrower. You are at a time in your life when you can afford to make some mistakes. And that being said, know the difference between risk and recklessness. I had to look. I wrote that down.
I don't know the second one.
Recklessness.
So I do have students who are 25 and under. I also have students in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So people who have a lot of life experience, who have decided this is what they would like to do. A lot of times those are my advanced generalist folks who say, I already know I want to administer a program, or I'm starting my own nonprofit, or working for a lower paying job, but I know it'll be worth it. So what would you say to those people transitioning into a career that's a great fit?
The only currency we have is time. Don't waste any more time. It doesn't matter what your age is. You got to try something, because in my opinion, stagnation is the worst thing that you can do for yourself. That's just, I've always looked at that way. If you feel you need to change, then make it. But practice some recklessness.
Practice some recklessness. Stage wise, I like it. Who has given you great advice about life?
I don't mean to sound pessimistic or cynical, but I have always just kind of listened to myself.
I know people who that works for them.
I'm not. If
You're an important voice, letting people know
Look,
that you can have
yeah.
that attitude and still be very flexible and cooperative and
Yeah.
collaborative.
I would suggest that you can learn a lot about other people, not necessarily by listening to them, but by watching what they do, their behavior, and how their lives end up. If somebody is on a path that you think, well, that looks all right, I look at how they got there and look at the end result.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot from someone just by observing. I mean, I've been envious of other people's lifestyles and all that. But then when you see how they got there and how it really ended up, you're like, you know what? Maybe not.
Yeah. There's no
So-
such thing as a bad example.
Everyone that you meet has something to teach you. And I used to make the mistake of thinking that was true, that you had to like that person for them to teach you something. That's not true at all. The people you don't like have something to teach you as well.
Yeah.
So that was something that
It's so icky.
it took me to get to midlife to realize that one. So it took me a while it took me to almost 50 to realize that one. Everyone you meet has something to teach you.
All right. Can you think about a project that you could not get to work out on your timeline and then it just worked out a different time?
Big project, college degree. If I would have went to college at 18, I never would have graduated. I did not have the maturity or the self-discipline to proceed with academics. I was not academically inclined. I would have lasted a semester.
Yeah.
So
getting a degree in English Lit, I guess, for those people who have a bachelor's degree in something, what has been the value for you of having a bachelor's degree?
A bachelor's degree will open doors. What I do want to say that times have changed, because I graduated in 2000. It is now 2025. The world has changed. I have an English Lit degree that just opens general doors for me. It's a very versatile degree. A lot of degrees nowadays are very, very specific. And I understand that. The society has changed a lot. People want to say, I need to know what this is going to do for me at the end. You know, they're very focused. They're very specific. I get that. The world has changed. Society has changed. So I understand that. My personal opinion is that a bachelor's degree will open doors for you that will not be there with a high school diploma. So,
and do you know what kind of degrees people should be looking at if they wanted to work for the West Virginia State Department of Arts and Culture?
Yeah, there is a public administration degree that is, in my experience here, highly sought after. That is a check mark for your application. Public administration, yes. Trying to think. I would say that would be your best bet. That's a very highly sought after in government. So yes.
And what about the super secret exhibit rooms? What kind of a degree do you need to get to look at those?
I almost forgot I was at an archaeological site.
Yeah. No, I was talking about state government first. So.
Yeah. So archaeology, I cannot speak. I am not an archaeologist, so I don't want to make anybody mad by talking about an area that I know nothing. But you will need a bachelor's degree in anthropology and then a master's in archaeology. I've worked with dozens and dozens of archaeologists over the year. I do believe that it is a passion career. I think you either know you want to do it or you don't.
Do you want to clean and assemble artifacts and remains?
Yes.
That is a basic question you have to ask yourself.
Yeah, it is. If you're going to dedicate yourself to something that demands that much of you, you better be very clear.
Because you're going to lose your eyesight over it. You're going to have nerve pain over.
So that's a passion career. I hate that word, but that's the only one I know how to use, because it's, but It is.
Mhm.
Airline pilots, same thing. If it has a long, strenuous path to get there, you better be sure.
Yeah.
And if you're going to get out, you better get out early.
Mhm.
So that's just my word of caution.
All right. How would you describe what you thought your work was going to be?
I had no expectations. So I guess that
I love that.
I didn't get disillusioned quickly, because if you have no expectations, you can't really be disillusioned.
Yeah. All right. Tell me about who raised you and how it impacted your career in public service.
I was raised. I grew up in a small farm town in Ohio, blue collar. I grew up working on a farm.
What kind of farm?
We had cattle and tobacco, South Central Ohio. So I know what work is. There was never a time I did not know. Well, when my family got home from work, then we went and worked on the farm. There was no,
Yeah.
we were not.
Those are two really demanding things to farm.
We were not people who laid around a lot. So I think I kind of inherited that. So in short, and I grew up in a very supportive area too. Neighbors helped neighbors, that sort of thing. So I think that was infused in me, that those who can help should help those who can't. And I think that's why this is a valuable position, because I have 100,000 people a year. I'm sorry, 10,000 people a year that come through this place, and you never know what kind of catalyst you're going to serve as. I can give an elementary school kid a poster, an archaeology poster. You probably just set him off on a path. So that's really important stuff. And not everything has to be a great big grand display. There's no fireworks or anything like that, but you can serve as a catalyst for other people to go their own direction. And I think that's a very valuable thing.
Yeah, to be the spark.
Yeah.
Can you think about part of the work that used to scare you that doesn't anymore?
I am not particularly skilled at public interaction. I know that's shocking.
It is to me. You're very smooth.
I am very introverted. I was a very shy child, and as I just mentioned, 10,000 people a year will make you not that way.
Yeah.
So, trial by fire.
You could be shy later.
Yeah,
in your retirement.
It's good for you. To get out of your comfort zone, as long as it's not torturing you.
One of my friends is very, very shy, and he would prefer not to speak ever, but he's like a manager.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
and he said,
right.
My father always told me that even if you're not confident about who you are, you're a really beautiful person, and you're robbing people of the opportunity of getting to know you. And that's not very fair.
Yeah.
Which is just the sweetest thing. It's the sweetest reason to me to be motivated to get out of your shell.
Yeah, you got to be yourself. Stretch yourself.
It's only weirdos out here. I've only ever met other weirdos in the world.
The older you get, the more you will realize that we're all just people.
Yeah.
And that will stop you from being so intimidated by people or afraid to approach, when you realize that we're all kind of the same at a certain level.
So, most people are going through today as a dress rehearsal.
Yeah, right.
Like there's only one Bill Murray who's got the Groundhog Day going on. The rest of us, we're just getting by.
No doubt.
In moments of reflection on your career, do you have an image that you call upon that makes you think it was really worth it?
An image, no, but if I have one thing in regards to that to say, it's that nothing worth having comes easy. You got to be able to accept that the struggle is inevitable. Like if something comes too easy, it's probably not worth it. You gotta put the work in to get anywhere.
Yeah. And the work is, for me, patience
Yeah,
and allowing things to percolate and come up when it's their time.
that's right.
Waiting for my teammates to appear, like that if you
Yeah.
build it, it will come. I can just build an idea and wait for other people to help me do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Because that
exactly.
mound was built over hundreds and hundreds of years with a lot of people who came and said, I can carry this basket.
Yeah.
Right. So I can wait for other people to come and carry the baskets with me.
Yeah,
I don't have to accomplish it.
I agree. Total. It's patience. And
It's a job.
It's that takes a lot of work to be patient. So
Mhm.
yes.
What are some information and action resources that community organizers and volunteers should know about to find positions where they can be change makers like this?
Oops.
I am very interested in being a change maker around, historic land back initiatives and water initiatives. And it seems like you're in some repatriation areas.
Mm-hmm. Start small. I think we all think we have to start huge. So what would you do? You would look at the biggest organization you possibly could, and you'd say, "I'm going to be a part of this," and you get lost in the mix. Every large organization is made up of a lot of smaller organizations. Your best bet is to start with the smaller organizations and work your way in. I know that sounds vague. I wish I could put it into better words.
Well, I didn't know I wanted to be a social worker. I thought I was going to be a special education major, but I can pinpoint a point in my career or in my education where my interest really changed. I was taking an honors course. I got a degree from the College of Mount St. Joseph. And in their honors curriculum, most semesters you could pick a religion class.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was Christ in Latin cultures. And I went to a church that had a 10 a.m. mass in Spanish for Puerto Ricans. So I was like, oh, yeah, cool. I'm going to learn more about Our Lady of Guadalupe. It was not bad. It was like United Fruit Company.
Oh, okay.
And I got involved in a letter writing initiative for banning an airplane glue that street children were getting high off of instead of eating. And it was killing them. And like in the course of the semester, they passed the law. And I just couldn't believe that I could be sitting on this tiny little campus where there was a convent. It was meant for Sisters of Charity, in the library reading about Amnesty International and a letter writing campaign, and that I could be a part of alleviating suffering.
Right.
And I became very interested in Amnesty International, but all of the jobs that I've ever gotten, I've fallen into, and it's some population I didn't know I kind of work with.
Yeah.
And what I found is the greatest opportunity for change is right here as far as my arm can reach, which is often local initiatives.
Yes. Thank you. You put it in much better words than I did. Start small and work your way out. That's the best way to put it. Yeah.
And who are some community partners you'd like to work with more closely? And what would make that easier?
What would make that easier is simply communication and outreach. I think we need what we were just talking about. Start small.
Yeah.
Work on your neighborhood before you go out nationally. You know what I mean? You don't have to start huge.
I want to do a multi-million-dollar PFAS project.
Yeah.
I really want to do it in this area. I can pick up litter in the gutter right in front of my house.
That's what I'm saying.
Remove some microplastics.
Yeah, exactly. Start. Look out your front door first before you go any further. I completely agree.
All right. Closing thoughts.
No, I just follow it. Listen, like I said at the beginning, listen to yourself. I think we don't trust ourselves enough when it comes to picking a career or something like that. If you like something, you'll know it. And if you don't, you'll know it. Don't try to force yourself to like things.
You can only be you. You just got to show up as you with your own unique set of gifts and probably strengths that we rely on too much that become our weaknesses.
Yeah. And that being said, listen to yourself, but realize at the same time that we're all in this together as well.
Yeah. Well, you're joining us for the textbook Community Organizing, a Practical Field Guide. And what a practical field guide to organizing a community.
Yeah.
Really perfect. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And like and subscribe. It's the universal love language.